In the previous two videos, I argued that first, Bitcoin's primary innovation was the creation of digital property rights. Second, that Sovryn's key innovation is the extension of that idea, building on the security of Bitcoin to generalize the idea of digital property rights to all sorts of assets and really all sorts of rights. In the second video, I argued that this has a powerful network effect, but that people were confused about what the network effect in crypto generally is. It's not the technology, but rather it's the institutions. In this video, I'd like to take that a step further, right? So let's start with the idea that we have discussed, which is that Bitcoin is an institution. It is the institution of sound money. And the fact that it is built on a blockchain is only part of the technology that it uses. It's not the network itself. So the Bitcoin main chain is not the network. And we can see this also by the fact that there's an entirely new networks being built around it, like Lightning Network, like Sovryn. So Bitcoin is an institution, and it's a base institution for sound money. Sound money has a powerful network effect. Now, we want to go up one level, right? We want to go from having sound money to having the free market in which we can use that sound money, and that free market is created by the creation of further institutions or further rule sets. So how do we scale this sovereignty? How do we scale sovereignty or the institutions that support it? And there's a basic rule that I think should guide us, which is that the more comprehensive a rule set, the more narrowly it should be applied, or the counter part of that, the other side of the coin of that, is that the more broadly applied a set of rules, the more narrow the rule set should be. So in the first video I said that Bitcoin only created, or the Bitcoin system up until now only created digital property rights for BTC. This isn't a bug, this is a feature, it is by design. Why was it designed in this way? The reason it was designed in this way is because the narrowest set of rules is just that set of rules for the creation of the sound currency. And a sound currency needs to be broadly applied, right? So you basically want everyone to be able to opt into this sound currency. And then they can use it however they want. They can hodl, they can use it on exchanges, they can wrap it and use it on Ethereum. But the base idea of this sound currency is going to be applied in such a way that ideally we would be able to have everyone in the world opt into it. Now, with Sovryn, we're adding an additional set of institutions, an additional rule set. So we're creating a more comprehensive rule set. This is going to be an additional thing that people need to opt into. And so, again, we want to follow that principle where if we want to have as many people as possible able and wanting to opt into it, we need to keep the rule set minimal. So, what is a minimal rule set for creating the institutions of a free market look like? Well, the most minimal aspects are going to be those things specifically related to the market. The ability to trade, the ability to lend against these assets, and potentially things like derivatives. It is also going to include the bitocracy, right? The governance system which governs the use of these tools and the evolution of these tools. And in an ideal scenario, over time, these tools would actually become less governed or non-governed, potentially, by the bitocracy. In other words, you would have an even reduced burden of rules that you would need to accept if you were to, for example, want to use the trading. But that's not exactly how Sovryn has been moving forward. Right now, the way Sovryn has been moving forward is it has also been creating a large number of ancillary rule sets, right? So we've created bridges, we've created the two-way, or have been working on fast BTC and are now working on a two-way fast BTC. We have created origins, and the number of things, of course, is much broader than that, but all of these things are governed by the bitocracy, and they're all currently part of just one monolithic system. In other words, they're a very comprehensive set of rules that if you're opting into the Sovryn system, you're opting into effectively all of those things. So if we want to scale, let's scale in the way that we previously described, right? So we start with Bitcoin. You need to accept Bitcoin to accept Sovryn, but not the other way around. And now we have Sovryn. We want to take this layered approach with Sovryn as well, which means that we want to be able to have specific types of rule sets that you don't have to opt in to entirely. When you're holding SOV or you're participating, for example, by staking SOV, you don't need to govern all of these systems. And the people who are interested in all of these systems are not necessarily going to be governing your other activities. The way we've described doing this is through the use of sub-protocols or subDAOs. These are still part of the Sovryn protocol, but they are limited. They are limited in whom they apply to, and they are limited in that you don't need to be aware of all of them if you want to use different parts of the Sovryn protocol. For simplicity and to give them a, I think, easier to think about name, I'm going to call these sub-protocols or subDAOs guilds. What is a guild? A guild is a rule set or the institutional infrastructure around a specific activity. So for example, origins would be the rule set and the governance mechanisms, as well as the governance participants who are interested in the launchpad. Zero would be the institution for creating zero interest Bitcoin collateralized loans. The Bitcoin backed stablecoin system, for now let's call it Mint, Sovryn Mint, would be the institution for creating an aggregated Bitcoin backed stablecoin. This type of construction, ideally, would still maintain the unity of purpose of Sovryn, would still allow everyone who is joining the Sovryn network to benefit from the large number of services, the large number of participants, basically benefit from being able to collaborate with all of the people using these systems, but without having to accept or opt into all of these systems. This is one of the reasons that we've previously described it as an operating system. And the way that this is currently being proposed is that we continue to use SOV as the coordination token, but not in such a way where SOV is going to be monolithic, right? So that when you're holding SOV, you are directly exposed to and participating in all of these different systems, but rather allowing these different systems to have their own abstracted governance system, which is backed by, supported by part of the protocol system, right, the Sovryn protocol, but in such a way where it has a high degree of opt-in autonomy. So the mechanism that has been proposed for origins to do this is, among other things, the bonding curve, right? By putting SOV into the bonding curve, you can generate the specific token, for example, with origins, the OG token, which would allow you to take a very narrow view on origins, which is separated from, but still collaborating with and benefiting from the entirety of the Sovryn protocol. Now, is this the perfect way of doing it? Is this the best way in which we can continue to build a cohesive single system benefiting from the entirety of the network effects, while at the same time scaling it? And the answer is I don't know. In fact, I would say that it probably isn't. I think that over time, we will develop methods that either improve upon the bonding curve mechanism or potentially can replace it entirely. So should we wait to discover these perfected methods before we begin to introduce this idea of sub-protocols and introduce the DNA of scalability through broad rules applied narrowly? And I would argue no. I would argue that it is extremely important that we not allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good. We need to build in this scalable DNA as soon as possible because Sovryn is still very young. And the way we are going to get Sovryn to unfold according to the principles that are important to us is to introduce the DNA of the important principles such as sovereign scalability in from the very beginning. Additionally, we're not going to learn what the best way of doing this is except through the process of trying, through the process of constant experimentation, learning, and improving. And so I would argue that one of the problems and one of the reasons that Bitcoin hasn't developed something like Sovryn earlier on has been this desire to have a perfect system. Sovryn is by no means perfect. It is constantly improving. Sovryn's scalability and the guild system of sub-protocols will start out by no means perfect, but with the ability and the DNA to constantly improve. And so it is for this reason that I think introducing this type of scalability is one of the most innovative things that we could potentially or probably will be able to do. I think it's core to the Sovryn mission and the ability for Sovryn to generate substantially powerful network effects. Network effects generated not through a layer 1, but through a network of institutions. And I think that when thinking about when we should start working on this, now is the time. There is no time like the present. So I think it is by creating this type of scalable sovereignty that we will be able to stay sovereign for the long term.